Well, hello and welcome to the B2B Growth Think Tank. Now, joining me today to help out a fellow business leader on the virtual hot seat is someone who that since 1999 has helped business owners, entrepreneurs in more than 50 different industries achieve real measurable results using his unique approaches to growing revenue, increasing cash flow, and magnifying business value. Now, in this time, he's earned a pretty good reputation as America's business alchemist by helping business owners and entrepreneurs break free of inertia, accelerate into the future they dream of through his Scaleology and business mastery systems, which he uses as the core foundational principles of dynamic and continuous business growth. And as he loves nothing better than sharing what he's learned by working with those who are dissatisfied with the status quo and they're eager to transform themselves and their business, I know that this is going to be an incredibly valuable hot seat session. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my guest today, Bill Prater, to the show. Bill, how are you doing?
It's great to be here. Thanks for that beautiful introduction. I enjoyed listening, seeing that you actually did a lot of research to dig all that out, because I never gave you one as a guide.
No, well, I enjoy stalking, researching my guests beforehand. And, we have had the pleasure of sharing an interview before on your excellent podcast as well. So it's a very interesting format, isn't it? It's 7 questions in 7 minutes, and it's quite a challenge. Well, for me and anyone that listens to the show will understand. I can sort of go off on tangents. So that was a welcome challenge to keep things really succinct and punctual, which I really enjoyed the format. So definitely check out the podcast. So what I want to first of all start with is I ask a question of my guests before coming on, and to tell me a fun fact or something that's amazing about you. And yours indicated that you're a very good guy to ask about wine. So what in your opinion makes a fantastic wine? And why am I saying that?
So that's an interesting question. And I can tell you that years ago, Adam, I had a wine cellar in my house that was physically about 3 meters by 3 meters. So it's a big room. And it was high enough up that I had to get on a ladder to get up there. The reason for that was, years ago, it was up to the buyer, if you will, to buy a wine, store it, test it from time to time, until it finally got to the point where you thought, this is really ready to drink. So that's the past. I don't have those kind of cellars anymore. I have a very small one. And the reason is, Adam, the industry's frankly really grown up well. So meaning that there's a high probability that unless you try to, pay a teeny amount of money, you can get a very, very fine wine from many, many retailers that are very palatable or even spectacular. So, but the short answer is, forget about all the snobs, forget about all the experts, drink what you like. Because the idea is simply to have fun. And if you're able to have fun with champagne or sparkling wine, do that. If you're able to have fun with some big, deep, rich port, do that. So have fun. That's really the right thing. And in fact, knowing you the way I know you, that's the way you approach business in general.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to enjoy things, and the reason I ask that is because you sort of mentioned that you're a founding member of the Knights on the Vine, and that's America's oldest wine connoisseur group. Is that the right way of describing it?
Yeah, it started out as a goofy idea of some local people to have some. So we had a test-of-on, we had badges, and we look kind of sort of like, if you can envision the people that wear the bow ties and smoke the pipes, that kind of an image. But then it actually turned into something international and real and significant, actually. They're almost in every country. It's not all that difficult to get into, but it is fun. But it's a little tight. By that I mean, there's not a lot of giggling. There's a lot of seriousness.
Right. Well, if you've got something you're passionate about, you want to take it seriously. So, no, that's interesting. I like to sort of ask that around, get to know the guest a little bit more on a personal side before we move on to business. And I guess one of the questions I'd like to ask you as we come on to what you've done professionally is, what would you say is one of the most surprising things about your career to date that you maybe never expected going in, but now it's like, wow,
Okay,
I never
yeah.
realized that.
Most surprising thing, I think, if I looked forward, when I was young and looking forward, I thought, well, I'd get into a company, I'd perform well, I'd get promoted, and then life would be good. And I'd ride off into the sunset and one day sit on the porch, my feet up, and enjoying retirement, if you will. So the most surprising thing was that I ended up pushing the limit to the point where I got fired 3 times. So when I got fired, Adam, I felt bad. I thought, this is awful. I just failed, and I got fired. And now with the ability to look back, frankly, those were blessings. And really, what was happening is I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I wasn't bright enough to recognize it. And it took my boss finally to step up and say, "You're out of here." Now, I would encourage all of us to embrace failing, because that's where you are able to determine where the limit is, if you will. Now, it'd be nice to fail small several times versus falling on your face. Before we started, Adam, we talked about young children and how your daughter is got to figure out how to grow up without a giant community around her because of what's going on in the world. And so but we can do that to ourselves too. In other words, by that I mean we can shrink our experiences down to the point where we don't realize what's happening around us very much, and we think we're sort of moving forward in oblivion. And that's looking back the way, in retrospect, I was actually operating. For example, I was with a big corporation. I felt that performance was the key. Well, in a big corporation, oftentimes, I don't know if, Adam, if you've ever been in one, but politics is often the key. You've got to figure out how to be a politician in a big corporation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's to be honest with you, one of the big reasons why it didn't work for me. I wasn't willing to play politics. I just didn't enjoy it. I just felt that you're there to perform a role, to do the best you can, and your results will speak for themselves. And that didn't always work, even though on paper, very, very different between 1 and 2 people. It was just, no, I'm not playing politics and, being that guy that is constantly slapping the back of the boss, even though, he turns around and, says all sorts of things. It just didn't fit with me. So it's an interesting one. And I think it's something, it's similar. It's almost like you feel that you have that self-reliance and therefore you are invincible. Whereas actually when you realize you cannot do any of this alone, you do actually need, and maybe if it, just because that environment didn't suit you, it didn't suit me. The politics thing, it could be a metaphor for its relationships and understanding the environment and the game that you're playing. And it's different in a business, and it's different in a role and a job. So that's a fascinating answer in terms of I can relate to it, put it that way. So, I mean, building on that though, would you say that having sort of got to that realization that there is one kind of skill or unique characteristic around you that has actually led or been a major contributor to your success?
Probably the major skill, if you will, is that I've discovered and believe that there's a right way to do things. And so once you are able to figure that out, then that formula will help it be successfully repeated time after time after time. A lot of people rely on if you will, innate skills to figure out something when they land in the middle of the mess. And that's great, but it's better to have figured out a skill. So that's kind of the second part of mine. The first one is I'm always seeking the right way to do something. And then in order to get there, the other thing I like to do is make sense. I'm always trying to make sense. And so when I see a new environment, and basically anytime I have a new client, it's a new environment, and I quickly try to make sense of it. And once I can make sense and start, if you will, removing the extra pieces and parts and signals, start reducing it down, then we're positioned properly to systematize it and figure out the right way to do it. So make sense of the environment. Mine comes naturally. If you don't have it naturally, you got to figure out how to do it. Make sense of the environment, and then convert that experience into a repeatable system or process or methodology.
So do you think then that there is a predictable pattern or formula that somebody can actually use to build or grow a successful business? Is there something out there that people can sort of take formulaically? Do you think that exists, or is it something that has to be that has to come from each individual person, business, that kind of thing?
Well, the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. The more successful a business is in its industry or niche, the more successful it is in its industry or niche, the more likely are you going to find similarities between them. So in other words, you can look at a construction company that's at the top of their industry. You can look at a coaching, consulting, online training firm that's at the top of their industry. You can look at a oral dental surgery practice that's at the top. And if you look at them without focusing on their product or service, you'll see that they're very, very similar. They follow the same pattern.
That's really interesting, because a lot of people may think, oh, they have a superior product, they have the better mousetrap, all that kind of thing. But let's be honest, we can look at stuff like McDonald's. They don't sell the best burgers, but they have the best system. So what do you think are those, if you had to sum up maybe the three core characteristics of those kinds of businesses that they have, what would you sort of say that they were?
Well, so first I'll give you a little backdrop, if I may, step back a little bit from the question. There are, although this is a kind of a gradual change, I see that there's 4 phases of businesses. Let's simply call it phase 1, 2, 3, 4. But the phase 1, Adam, is where the business and the individual that owns the business are indistinguishable. So it's the same. These are the people that have, they're solopreneurs. Maybe their name's on the door, if you will. Janice Fitzgerald Chiropractic, and that's it. I mean, you just go, you go in, and she's all by herself. She's got a couple people in the waiting room, and then she walks out and she says next. So that's a good illustration. Phase 1. Phase 2 is sort of an extension of that first phase, and it's where people have hired some staff, but it's really to leverage themselves. So they're not the staff is not independently operating. It's helping out, if you will, the boss. So it's still a boss dependent industry or a company. So phase 1, the boss and business, exactly the same. Phase 2, there are some people there, but they're helping the boss out. Phase 3 is where the boss is becoming less essential, moving away and letting the team do it. In other words, back to our chiropractor, where you can walk in and see that she isn't even there, that there's 3 or 4 other people, and she's out with her daughter in the park swinging on a swing, and her business is running. So it's a boss independent business. So starts from they're one and the same. There's a little staff helping out, to the individual owner is not essential, And once you get that point, you're able to get to this fourth zone where growth is virtually vertical. And that's where companies are growing dynamically. And so when I said, if you look at the elite atom of each industry, they look the same. So all super successful companies at the highest level, i.e. the highest level of management, look the same. So that's a long answer to the quick question. So the objective, maybe, it doesn't have to be, is to move through those stages. You know, some people would be very happy to have themselves in a virtual assistant someplace in Brazil or something, helping them out. Perfect. That's perfectly fine. So step one would be to figure out really where you want to get to, and maybe you don't want to have, you know, the number one player in your industry. You'll be happy with having a few people and making a good living. So the answer is a little different, stage by stage by stage, but the three major components are number one, and we'll get on this later when we get into our topic about our, you know, if you will, our virtual hot seat. But number one is to not go along with the crowd, which says deal with the hand that you get. Deal with it. No. Cross that off. Number two situation is that I suggest people turn on or discard literally, and that is following the industry standards or the industry best practices. Ignore all of those. You will not find any elite player in any industry that does what the average company does. They do differently. It's entirely different. So the sooner you can say, I'm not going to follow the industry standard, the better off you'll be. And the third one is to be heavily, almost exclusively reliant on a high-powered team. So those are the three sort of things. And the last one is really the flip side of it is, do not believe the way you've been programmed since childhood or birth, and that is you've got to be a superhero. You've got to be Wonder Woman. You've got to be the person that can do it all. Once you deprogram yourself from that belief, the better off you are. The truth is, there isn't any such thing as an actual Wonder Woman, and don't try to go there. Instead, be somebody that says, I don't know how to do a thing. All I know how to do is run this business that's netting $1.5 million to me personally a year, but I don't even know the business very much. Perfect. That's excellent.
Well, it's the difference, isn't it, between, you know, being an operator and an owner, and actually sort of understanding there is a different skill set required. And not everyone is going to be level 4 as soon as they start, are they? There is a growth period for the owner of the business as much as there is the business itself. And I think a lot of us sometimes forget that, and that the growth of the business is sometimes plateaued by the level of the personal development of the owner themselves and their mindset and all the rest of it. But I think that ultimately what you're talking about there is success leads clues. And you can take a look at the people at the top and see how they're structured, if that's where you want to go, or look at a business at the level that you want to get to and maybe model it, because that's, you know, one of the smartest things you can do, stand on the shoulder of giants. And I love your reference about Wonder Woman, not because we are looking like Wonder Woman today, but it's more along the lines of, I do think, you know, a big thing about this show and my business is that you can't do it alone, and that, you know, ultimately a rising tide will lift all ships. So I'm curious to know, is there someone in your career, your business today, in the past, that's had such a huge impact? Is it one person? Is it a group of people? And what was it that they gave you that helped you rise?
So the answer is, it's been a group of people, and some of them have been sort of forward by saying, I offer to be your mentor. So that would be an example. But many of them are people that are just sort of giving you what appear at the time to be sort of offhanded advice. And the trick is, when somebody says something, particularly somebody that's been down the road before you, So if you think about all of us, our comfort level is in our current situation with our current friends. Why? Because it's familiar. People like where you are. Now, when you decide to move out of that group and get into a different environment, when you said shoulders of giants, well, what happens then is your friends resist that. They like you the way you are. When you decide to change into something else, they resist it. So your family, your siblings, your friends, they're all anchors on this. So instead, what you need to do is look at somebody out there that's where you want to be, and be a pest and get on their if you will, radar to the point where they can say something. So I remember, for example, quick story. I ended up the big company I was talking about that I worked for, and I was on a fast track with them. Fast track meaning getting promoted very fast. Is that I ended up getting promoted from Seattle to an IBM plant down in San Jose. So San Jose, so San Francisco, bunch of the Bay Area cities, then San Jose is way down to south, if you will. So I got promoted there, and the regional manager called me on the phone. I didn't know the guy, right? Calls me on the phone, says, hey, Bill, what I suggest you do is to find a place in Palo Alto, which is about halfway down the peninsula. San Francisco, all these cities, Palo Alto, then a bunch of cities, and then San Jose. I'm thinking to myself, that would make a pretty long drive to work. Pretty long drive to work. Okay, I didn't do it. I bought my house someplace else, close to work. So then along came a year, and I got a call from the same guy, and he said, hey, Bill, I noticed that you didn't buy a house in Palo Alto. Now, this is like my boss's boss's boss. And I said, no. And he said, well, here, IBM, we can only move people once every 2 years. And since you were moved 1 year ago, you're not promotable.
Right.
So that little signal that said, why don't you buy a house in such and such a place? I could have said, well, why, or something. I didn't. But so the answer is mentors can be, can proclaim themselves, but most of the time it's people that for some reason or another decide to give you a teeny little bit of advice. And they won't put it in, here's some advice. They'll just make a comment. And so I would encourage our listeners to be on the lookout for people that have been there before you that say any little sort of thing about any sort of little topic.
And the way that you improve your hit rate, I guess, of that happening is by getting into an environment where, I mean, it's kind of like where, I don't know if you heard of the concept of normalization. So your environment dictates, essentially where you're going to. So if you are looking to get to a level, then don't surround yourself with people that are just starting. Surround yourself with people that have the experience and where the things that you want to achieve are normal. That whole thing, don't be the smartest guy in the room, get a new room, that kind of thing. And that is exactly it, because when you are in those environments, that is when you can start listening. And it's a big reason for having a podcast, because I get to talk to people that are way more experienced than me, way more knowledgeable about these sorts of things. And I'm always listening out. I mean, I just sit and listen for some of these little nuggets, and it's a fantastic. I'm blessed by it. I love the opportunity of talking with people, and because this is my environment. It's anyone that hasn't got something like this, I do think that you go out and try it, just because you get the opportunity to talk to awesome people. So coming on to that, would you say that you've got a specific growth strategy that you've employed over the years that you keep coming back to over and over again, or has it evolved as you've gone? What are you using, or what are you using today, or what is your number one strategy for growing a business?
The short answer is that it stayed the same and evolved a little bit. So the foundational principles have not changed at all. Out on the margin, things are a little different. So I first discovered basically what I verbalized earlier on about, the way the elite players are different. I used to own an investment banking firm. We were in Wall Street in New York City, and we had about 150 people that worked for me. But I even though I had a large number of people, I was really in phase two. In other words, these people were supporting me. I was the one that was sort of made the deals, Adam, and then my employees raised the money, in simple terms. So I wanted to sell the business. I was tired of it. It was worn out. It was a lot of stress. We had a lot of money involved and invested other people's money. And I was very filled with stress. Nobody would buy my business. Why? Because I was such an integral part of it. And I focused really hard on looking at the industry and try to emulate the best practices. And looking back, it was a fool's game. I got seduced into believing that nonsense. So one day, talking about mentors, I ended up meeting this woman who was a competitor of mine who owned an elite firm. It was not a big firm. It was just extremely elite. And so she said to me, "Bill, you're looking in the wrong place." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, look at my company. So do I look like other investment banks?" I said, "Well, no, you're and I'm exaggerating a little bit to make the point. You're a little bit of an odd duck." "Yep, I'm an odd duck." "And your company's in Salt Lake City. It's not on Wall Street." Yeah, I'm in Salt Lake City." Wow. I go, wow. She said, "So just pay attention." So what I did is I was able to effectively, I'm going to use the word invent, but really it's cobbling together various things into something, a system, I mentioned right way, to find the right way for me to convert my business very fast from a boss dependent business into one that the business was independent of me, that I was irrelevant. So the buyer could buy my business and not me. So I was able to do that in 3 years. And so I created a system for that. Simultaneously, I used that system that I'd created that I could see working wonders for my company, and Adam, and I insisted that my clients adopt the same one. Now, I had a big lever, right? So people wanted me to raise $10 million for them, and I'd say, "Adam, I will raise the 10 million if you run your business the way I asked you to."
It's an irresistible offer.
Yeah, that was it. So I had that lever. But then what happened is when I sold the business, I changed my interaction with my clients. And I discovered that among, if you look at my investments in a bell curve, well, I could see that the ones that were most likely to give me multiple returns on my investment were the elite companies. Makes sense. They were the most successful. So they were the ones most receptive to what I was saying as well. So when I sold my business, I just rolled into my current business with a built-in client base. So I began kind of at the ending. So when I started my business, in this current business in 1999, I had high-end clients. I had people paying me large sums of money on a monthly basis. I had all the things that many of our listeners are trying to get to. I went in the back door, if you will. But what I discovered is the exact same system worked for me and has worked for hundreds of different kind of companies in hundreds of different shapes and sizes all over the planet. Universally applicable standard method of running a business. Yes.
Yeah, and there's a few things I hear in there, and I don't know if you've ever seen the series Fargo, but there's a picture in one of the early seasons of that, and it's basically, I mean, I noticed this because there's a school of fish, one going one way, and then just a single fish going the other way, and it says, "What if everybody else is wrong?" And I kind of got attracted to that because I think that, as you say, if you're trying to do what everybody else is doing, you're just going to end up looking like everybody else, and it's going to be harder to stand out. That in itself is a growth strategy. Do something different, stand out, be different. People will pay attention. And I think that the other one is that it's all about understanding that you can actually choose the type of client that you work with. You may be applicable
Yes.
to a numbers,
Yeah.
but you're one of the key growth strategies is choose your target client and market wisely. If you know you can get great results, but they have to have a certain criteria, i.e. they have to be an elite level company, or position yourself to serve them. Don't waste your time with people that are not going to be receptive to what it is that you do, because you're just going to be banging your head against the brick wall. And that in itself is a growth strategy. And I love some of these answers because I love the fact that they are strategic and they are not tactical, because a lot of people will be thinking tactics, but that isn't what moves the needle. So right. Fascinating. And again, an example of just keeping ears open and listening to some of those things that comes from experience. So what I'd love to jump onto now is to take some of that experience, take some of that wisdom, and let's go and help somebody out that is facing a growth challenge right now. And we'll jump onto the virtual hot seat. So today's question has come in, and it's an interesting one. Because I think in light of the current situation, maybe a lot of us are going through something similar, or we feel that we've been in this or experiencing this situation. So the challenge has come in, and name redacted, preferred not to be named, but I do know that this is a PR firm. So the challenge is we have recently lost a few large contracts due to COVID. These contracts have been big enough to keep us busy for the last few years, but it's also made us quite lazy in keeping our name out there. And we haven't had a serious private inquiry for months now, and it's starting to feel like we're starting all over again. What would you do? So first thoughts on that?
Well, so that was so you had shared the question with me earlier, so I have thought about it a bit. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to answer the question so that everybody, including the woman that asked that question, would be able to benefit. And that is, first, I mentioned earlier that we are. I use the word program. What I mean by that is we've been taught over and over and over again to do various things, and it's helpful. For example, so we don't have to think very much about driving a car. We did when we first learned. It was extremely difficult and complicated. But now you don't think about it. All you think about is getting to such and such a place, and you go do that. Back to our business, we've been programmed, and we still are. There's huge, huge pressure to be a lemming, to follow the crowd, to listen to the experts, to be ordinary. And so part of that is the environment we're in is a crisis caused by a pandemic, right? No, that's not it. It's just another adversity that's in your way that came from outside. It's got nothing to do with you. And so your choices are deal with the circumstance as is, i.e., deal with the hand that you're dealt, or forget about that notion and go, Adam, as you just said, that little, I envision red fish, the little red fish leaving the school and doing it differently. So that's kind of part one is whatever in the world everybody else is doing in the PR industry or whatever industry you happen to be in with a similar sort of a situation, don't follow the industry, because they're all just in the middle of that bell curve. They're all average. They're doing what the average does. So instead, be that red fish, jump out and do something differently. And maybe the first thing, Adam, you kind of teed it up, and that is maybe those are the wrong clients in general. Because one thing's clear about those particular clients, they are lemmings. They are following the crowd. If you think about it, in a situation like this, you should be double spending on public relations. You shouldn't be backing away. That's where you need help, so that you've got a customer that doesn't understand the value proposition. Now, I don't know your company, but probably if you look through the lens of the industry, you've positioned yourself as a PR company. That's involved in this part of this industry that does things in a certain way. I don't know, with certain logos and brand statements and taglines and whatever in the world it is that the industry does. If you're going to be successful in this environment, in fact, any other environment, you got to reinvent the whole approach. You've got to be able to say to people, well, people think we're a PR firm, but we're not a PR firm. What we are is we're somebody that bridges the gap between current circumstances and the dream. That's it. And they said, well, how do you do that? Well, question is, are you concerned about the way we do it or the result? Well, the result, good. Then just imagine that I'm doing it with magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think
the overall lesson there is, let's call that 1/3 of the answer.
Yeah.
And that is, forget about the circumstances that you're given, look in it through a different prism, which could include firing the client. Could be the wrong client. Maybe this is a signal like me getting fired. It's a signal that maybe you're in the wrong ball game.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because you can sort of look at the situation and yes, you are seeing things in crisis mode. And there was an element of that came through the question. It was, right, we are suddenly left with zero pipeline and what do I do? And you can almost sort of see them, sitting there going, right, do I go and now and try and sort of spend money over here or do it over here? Do I get on LinkedIn? Do I, Clubhouse or whatever it is that's going on at the moment? You can almost see that sort of panic going on. So the first thing is, as you say there, breathe, take a step back and just maybe take half a day if you've got a team. And actually now is the time to start questioning, is our offer relevant to the market? And if it's not, how do we change it? And if you need to know how to change it or what to change it to, the best thing you can do is define who you want that client to be and go and have a conversation with them. Find out their problems. What is it that you're trying to achieve? It doesn't even have to be specifically garnered around the PR side of things of what they're doing. Find out what they are struggling with, what their goals are, all that kind of thing. And you can then get a picture of what their day looks like, what their business looks like, what things are happening that you can actually start to see how the skills that you have can support their goals and their objectives. And then you can start crafting more of an offer. It may well be your existing offer and it's perfect for them. However, you don't know
earlier
that.
on, you actually brought this up. Excuse me, I cut you off and I apologize.
That's all right.
Okay.
Keep going.
So earlier on, you actually said avoid the trap of tactics. And so back to programming, most of us have been taught when we were young, you're in your house, your parents are there, and one of your siblings drops a glass of milk. All of a sudden you hear, Adam, get up and do something about that. You jump up, what? And you run around the house and you get a broom and you do all that stuff. We're programmed to jump up and take Adam, what you just said, so beautiful. You want to do the exact opposite. Don't jump up. Don't do anything. For heaven's sakes, don't get seduced by somebody's new shiny penny, i.e. sales page, and instead take a breather, go someplace, sit down by yourself or your team, and reinvent what you're doing. Reinvent it totally. In fact, don't do anything. Just sit there and let the universe give you some input if you want. But for sure, don't go sweep up that broken glass yet. Make sure you figure it out. Like, for example, maybe you should get some shoes on before you walk out there in that field of broken glass.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe something a little bit more tangible that they could do that while they're also doing this could be, I guess, I know this person, they do have a book of clients. They do have people that they are still serving. It's just that their big contracts have gone. So one of the things that could happen is go and have these kind of conversations with your existing clients. It's almost like interview your existing clients and find out what's going on in their business, because what you will undoubtedly know this. Your biggest asset is your existing client base, but more importantly, it's the relationship you have with that client base. If you can go in and be shown to be curious and trying to find out more ways of supporting them, they will tell you what they need. There's no need to go out there and do, some sort of fancy marketing campaign, because if you've got an asset that's existing right in front of you, they will give you a lot of these answers. So set up, we used to do things like boardroom briefings. where we get a bunch of clients around a table. We can't do that, but you could get them onto a Zoom call if you wanted to do it as a group thing, and have a conversation and just say, we know that you guys are in a similar sort of space. Tell us about what's going on in your business. What's going on? What is the industry? How do you see things going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can find out so much information because you are putting yourself in an environment and you're normalizing it so that you can be the 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you can actually hear what's going on. And then you can take what you learn, strategize with your team and say, right, interesting. We've got something that we think could actually help you solve all of the challenges or some of the challenges that you said you had going on in your business. Are you open to hearing about it? Like, do that with a few clients. There's almost certainly something there, because I always say that there is almost undoubtedly within either your existing client base or your network 6 to 7 opportunities of hidden growth opportunities. You've just got to know how to open the doors to the conversations that will create them. So that's what I would do. Any sort of final thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree totally with what you just said. I use a tool for that. So think about an XY graph, if you will. Love on one scale and gross margin or gross profit in the other. And then just plot all your clients on there. And what you want to do as a business owner is you want to deal with as many as you possibly can customers, clients that you love your relationship with them and who give you a lot of gross margin or revenue or however you want to measure that. I remember a time, a little quick story about a client of mine in the fruit business. And one of their clients was a company called Walmart. Now, Walmart has a reputation of being absolutely brutal on vendors. That's their reputation. So I'm with this client, and I asked them to plot all their clients on this love profit scale. And Walmart ranked low on love and they didn't make any money. So the choices are forget about doing business with Walmart because they don't make any money, and also you don't like working with them. Okay, so they say to me, "What would you do, Bill?" And I said, "Well, I'd go talk to Walmart and ask them how you can be the number 1 fruit vendor." They said, "As simple as that?" I said, "Simple as that. Go ask them. They'll tell you." So they did. They went down and had a meeting with Walmart, and they said, "Hey, how could we be number 1?" And I got lots of stories like that, hundreds of these, but it's the same story. It's the one you just teed up. So when you're with somebody in an environment like that, and you say, how can we blank? How can we rise to number 1 in your eyes? How can we help you reach your goal? Anything, how can we? People will say, well, you could blank. So Walmart told them exactly what to do, and they did it. So today, Walmart ranks in this company number 1 on love, meaning the most fun to do business with and the most profitable company they have. And so that's a tool that everybody should use all of the time. Graduate to the upper right corner where all of the high profit and high love exists.
And I think the real sort of summary around all of that is it's beautiful because it's something that I've learned the hard way. And it's been said before in a number of places, but it's so like one of the big lessons that I'm learning is the quality of your outcomes is determined by the quality of your questions. Most people don't ask questions. It's a little bit like your example right at the beginning about being told to have a house in Palo Alto. You didn't ask the question. Why?
Right.
Most people are either scared to ask a question or they don't know the right question to ask because they're not comfortable enough to hear the answer.
Good way to put it.
So one of the key things that you can do is go and ask questions, actually talk to your market, your clients, and all the rest of it, even the ones you don't like working with, or even the ones that you've had a sketchy relationship, because you actually want to hear the negative answers. How can we do better? What can we do to improve?
You should talk to prospective clients too and say, I'm not coming to make a sales question whatsoever. I'm doing some market research. Would you be interested in participating?
Yeah.
And you go and you say, hey, if you were to found a public relations firm, what would you want it to do for you? And they'll tell you what they want.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, new product, new service.
Yeah. And it's such a, sometimes these simple things are the most effective, but sometimes it's the thing between our ears that make it the hardest to do. Go and ask questions, talk to people. So yeah, that's a fascinating, I hope that has helped the lady that sent this in, and I will be making sure that she knows that it's been featured. So just to sort of start wrapping up, one thing, why don't you sort of tell us about the kind of ideal client that you work with and the big problem that you solve for them?
So the ideal client I have, Adam, would be essentially a seasoned business owner. And I use the word seasoned because they need to have experienced some of the things we've talked about. They need to have tried a bunch of tactics and have them fall on their face. They need to have purchased an online course and studied it and seen that it didn't work. They've needed to copy the industry averages and see that didn't get me any place. They need to hire a few people that were bad hires. So they're seasoned. So generally speaking, my ideal client is at least in phase 2, in some place moving towards phase 3. So they've got in their mind, things should be better. They've got a dream. They've been in business long enough to see it not fulfilled. And normally the dream is freedom. If you think about all of us as business owners, it's freedom. You want to be free from whatever in the world existed in the past. You want more money, and you want more time, and you want all these kinds of more love, more appreciation, etc. Freedom. So I need somebody that's seasoned, experienced got some cuts and bruises and broken bones, and they can say genuinely, I've done everything I can think of. I've listened to all kinds of people, and I am not free. I have not gotten to where once they're at that point, then when I say to them, you've got to reinvent your mind. You got to toss out your old way of thinking and adopt a new one. Number 2, you've got to systematize your approach. You can't run your business from a whack-a-mole standpoint, i.e., when the pandemic comes up, deal with it. No, you've got to have a systemized approach. And then third, in the best possible path to freedom is you've got to invest in hiring A players. By A, I mean the absolute best person who's willing to take your job at the salary you're offering. That's an A player. Their production level is so geometrically better than an average player, it'll completely free you. And once you've got there. So that's my ideal client, somebody that's gotten themselves to the point where they actually know what they did in the past didn't work very well.
And so what's the problem you solve?
So the primary problem is the problem of being kind of trapped in the thing you've built. So people get to the point where they feel, I'm stuck. I went from not being free working for IBM to not being free in my own business. So the problem is getting people to fundamentally get free of the environment that they've created for themselves. And once they've done that, then the path towards more revenue, more profit, more personal income, and building a business of value somebody else might want to buy is a possibility. And until that problem is solved, that's the other things are not possible.
And are you able to share a bit of a story, an example of how you've helped someone solve that in what you do and the process that you take them through? Have you got any, what was their situation?
Well, I've got dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, but one that comes to mind, which speaks a lot to this whole notion of the market, is I have a client who is a printing company, meaning that people hire them to print brochures and catalogs and that type of thing. And so that's what they do. And the industry fundamentally is sort of a local business. They print for the local environment. They may have a sales rep or two that makes calls on the various companies, land agreements, bring back a job order, and then they produce it and ship it out. So this person, his name is Craig, was able to realize there's no reason that, if you think about it, there's things called like freight. So you can actually ship a job a pretty good distance in a pretty good time. There's some great logistics company. So by just simply changing his mind from being a local printer trapped in the geography that his trucks get to in a day, if you will, he's now one of the largest online printers in the country of the United States. So all of his business comes through his website. People come onto his website, make an order, he produces it, ships it out to them wherever they are in the USA. So that's a quick, simple story of somebody that only simplistically changed his mind about what his market should be. And everybody thought he was crazy. I mean, that's not the way the industry works. It doesn't work that way. Now, he's been doing this for quite some time. He's one of the top one or two in the country. Other people now in his industry do this. They've copied him. But he's right now thinking about an entirely new way of going about it. And the entirely new way would be not to do any printing himself at all, but just be the marketing hub, and then farming all the work out to other printers across the nation. So and he's close to making that decision, which would reinvent the industry one more time. So mind shift story, right?
Yeah, it's incredible, because it just shows that sometimes, that whole saying, big doors swing on small hinges. And what may appear at the very beginning to be quite a small decision can have such an exponential impact. But it's because it was a decision that was made at the foundational level, which is where everything else stems from. You get people in the industry, marketing, online digital marketing, and they'll obsess about getting a 0.5% increase because you change the color of a button on a landing page, right? Brilliant.
Excellent point. Yeah. Well, even in his case, he made a strategic decision. So what he did, and now today, for example, he does do Facebook ads. But what he didn't decide when he made his decision was to do Facebook ads. So that dangling, shiny thing didn't attract him. What attracted him was, I need to change my strategy. So strategy trumps tactical things any old time. So never, ever do anything tactically unless it fits in with your strategy.
You are preaching to the choir. Absolutely. 100%.
I know.
Bill, this has been a fantastic conversation, and thank you so much for sharing not just your value and your story, but your wisdom and advice for our virtual hot seat. I know that is going to be incredibly valuable. So for those listening that would love to learn more and connect with you, where is the best place to find out more about Bill?
Okay, look, Adam, knowing that you're a super generous guy, I said, okay, I got to do something nice too. So what I've done is I've taken my foundational course, which typically sells for $297. And for you and your listeners, Adam, I've made that $0. And so they simply go to getbillsgift.com, getbillsgift.com, and they'll be able to get access to that $300 course for $0. And then once they've done that, I'll see that they've got some interest in changing their trajectory of their company, and then we can begin a dialogue. So getbillsgift.com.
And I will add that link to the show notes. And first of all, that's incredibly generous. Thank you. And second of all, as whoever is listening to a podcast, just to let them know that your podcast is Supercharged Business.
Oh, the podcast. Yes. I was thinking, and you got the ball. Supercharging Business Success. That's
Supercharging Business Success. And again, I will leave the link. And as I mentioned at the beginning, fortunate enough to come and be on the show, and it's a great format. You're listening and probably used to a longer format, so it'll be a bit different, because it's sort of 7 to 10 minutes, but it's a fantastic format, and I highly recommend it. So Bill, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and Thanks very much, and we will speak soon.
Great. Thanks for having me on.